Before I read my obviously prepared remarks, I was at a hotel last night and I couldn't find a printer that would print it out, so it remains on my iPad. I just want to say that in the business that Dustin did, that many of us in the back there went through together, you spend weeks, months at a time with somebody, and you share some incredible stories about their family and their friends and what their lives are. But after you go home to those family and friends and your family and friends, you really never get to see the reality of it. And I think it's unfortunate for many of us that this is the first time that we're getting to see the faces of Dustin's story. ISR, as was mentioned earlier, is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and it's a new industry. It's new in the sense that there's such a proliferation of civilians that are doing it right now. When 9/11 occurred, it was a horrible time for the aviation industry. There are pilots furloughed from the major airlines, people laid off from corporate aviation, people with a lot of experience who were looking for a job while they were laid off from their primary employer. There were many ex or retired military pilots and operators, as we call them, the people in the back who were flying with us. And they were doing this kind of work. Security clearances were required, so the recent military personnel were an easy fit into the business. However, there was a small group of pilots who came from civilian-only backgrounds who were able to get into this line of work, and many of them started at one smaller company and then moved on to the company with whom Dustin would be employed. I'll start by saying that Dustin was unique. I mean, we all know that. You guys know that far better than we do. But he joined us with no security clearance at all, which was unusual at that time, except for one of the guys back there. I actually interviewed him over the phone, and the biggest pro on his side for getting a job with us was the fact that we had a lot of king air time, and that was the airplane we happened to be flying. I had no military time, no experience at that smaller company that I alluded to earlier. So I explained to him that he would really have to prove his motivation and prove himself when he got out there. Once his clearance came through and he was sent overseas, it was go time. And even over the phone, I could tell that this guy was quietly sincere. It was very obvious, very obvious that he was going to be able to do this. Even over the phone, I knew that. So when Dustin finally did make it out overseas, many of us had already been doing that particular job for several months. It was exciting work. It could be very demanding, although it could be extremely boring at times too, as we can attest. We called it NASCAR, flying big circles in the sky over and over and over, just round and round. It really gets boring, but when it's exciting, it's pretty busy. I was one of the instructors, and I flew with him on some of his first flights. It was actually the first time that I'd met him face to face, and I saw his half smirk smile, and I went, uh-oh, we hired some smart aleck with no skills here. And I quickly found out that was not the case. He was a smart aleck, but no. Everybody knows him, knows that half smirk smile that he has. He hid some stuff there. That was supposed to be a really big smile once we figured that out. Dustin was like a sponge, and he really soaked up all the information that came his way. When he found out what we were actually doing and for whom, he was just as motivated as a young warrant officer or lieutenant pilot going out for the first time. You know, he was just, this is awesome. You know, we're doing something really important here. He was serving his country. He was doing something that he obviously cared about and was excited to be doing. So it was infectious. So I realized how lucky we were to have him as part of the team. Part of what a lot of us ex-military people like about this kind of business is you get to retain that camaraderie, that sense of common spirit, common purpose that we all have in the military. You know, we all would hang out together after flights, and we did this in this job, hang out and have a cigar, or hang out at the dining facility and drink coffee and just relate stories about all of you, about what went on the night before, the day before, in the job. And it's amazing to me how well Dustin was accepted into this group and immediately became part of this fraternity, this bond of brothers, which we all experienced, we all became a part of. I didn't know him that well later on, but the fact that he stayed with it for so long, I would imagine that's part of it. Not just the sense of purpose that he had in the job that he was doing, but the fact that he was hanging out with a bunch of crazy guys that he really enjoyed hanging out with. Sounds like two of his best friends I just heard from. So, and those of us who are in other aspects of aviation know that you don't get that anywhere else. You know, at the airlines, you fly with somebody for a few days, move on, maybe never see him again. So even if you had a bond, you forget about it. So Dustin was, as I said, he was celebrated within the circle. He was accepted, celebrated, and he was working with people that came from all different communities, on the ground and in the air. SEALs, Rangers, A-10 drivers, F-16 drivers, all sorts of amazing people. And he proved himself as an aviator, as a tactician, as a fellow warrior. Unlike those of us who left to go on to different jobs, Dustin stayed with it and became a master aviator and a mentor to many. He was one of those guys who always had a desire to serve and found his niche serving some of the greatest Americans we could ever work for, and also flew with some of the greatest Americans that we could hope to be around. I told my wife not long after hearing about Dustin's loss that I felt responsible. I hired him. I told him how hard he was going to have to work to prove himself, and that he would have to work hard to do so. And when I trained him, I wanted to make sure that he was a pilot who knew everything that could be known about what was going on with the mission and on the ground and what we were doing to help our boys down there. I wanted them to just not fly circles and build flight hours and collect a paycheck, but I wanted him to be as motivated about what we were doing and why as I was. And I know that he was. Dustin, you're a patriot and a warrior. And you will be remembered as such. Those of us who worked with you know the truth. Hope knows the truth. Little heaven will know the truth. Dustin wasn't just a contractor. He was an ISR pilot and a damn good one. Now, he was watching over other people when he was gone. That was his job. Now he'd be watching over you guys. Dustin, you will never be forgotten until the